Welcome and bienvenue. My name is Mike de Gagne. Je suis le président
I am the president-elect of the board for the Federation of Humanities and Social Sciences.
and for the Humanities and Social Sciences. I'm delighted to welcome you to the first event in our flagship Big Thinking series at this 90th Congress of the Humanities and Social Sciences, the largest virtual academic gathering in Canadian history. Today's event will take place in English and Dene, and we're offering American Sign Language, ASL, and Langue des Signes Québécoise, LSQ, interpretation. Also French and English simultaneous interpretation, as well as live closed captioning in English and French. ASL and LSQ interpreters will now have appeared on your main Zoom screen. Now for some technical, just some sort of technical advice here. To turn on simultaneous interpretation, please go to the bottom of your Zoom screen where it says interpretation, and you can toggle between the language of presentation and the language of interpretation. To turn on English closed captioning, please navigate to the bottom of your screen and click on the closed captioning button. You may also find it under settings. For French closed captioning, please click on the link provided in the Zoom chat box. This information will also appear in the chat box during the event. So now to begin. On behalf of the Federation, I wish to acknowledge that the University of Alberta, which is hosting us virtually today, is located on Treaty 6 territory in the Métis Nation homeland, a traditional gathering place for diverse Indigenous peoples, including the Cree, Blackfoot, Métis, Nakota Sioux, Iroquois, Dene, Ojibwe, Saulteaux, Anishinaabe, Inuit, and many others. And I'm coming to you today from the territory of the Six Nations of the Grand River. We give heartfelt thanks to the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit knowledge keepers, Dr. and Elder Francis Whiskeyjack, Elsie Gauthier, the cultural helper, and Edna Elias, the Inuit knowledge holder, for their teachings which opened Congress. As we gather here virtually, we extend our respect to all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples for their valuable contributions, both past and present. The Big Thinking series is held throughout Congress. It brings together leading scholars and public figures who present forward-thinking ideas and solutions to the critical questions of our time. This year's series was developed in close partnership with the University of Alberta. We have an exciting lineup of 6 speakers who will share insights and lead conversations on this year's Congress theme of Northern relations and ongoing conversations about confronting anti-Black racism and colonialism. We
want to thank also the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, Universities Canada, and the Canadian Foundation for Innovation for their sponsorship of the series of conversation, Big Thinking.
Honor to welcome here today the Honorable Ethel Blondin-Andrew, the first Indigenous woman elected to Parliament. She served for 17 years as Member of Parliament for the District of Western Arctic in the Northwest Territories, 13 of those years in Cabinet. We are delighted to have this opportunity to learn more from such a remarkable leader about Indigenous-led conservation and pathways to healthy futures for land and for people. After the talk, there will be a brief conversation with our moderator, after which the Honorable Ethel Blondin-Andrew will be able to answer a few questions from the audience. You can submit these questions by typing them into the question and answer box. You can also participate in the conversation on Twitter using the hashtag BigThinking and CongressSH. Thank you for joining us today. It is now my pleasure to present Dr. Ted Hewitt, President of the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council. Ted will introduce us to the Honorable Ethel Blondin-Andrew and Dr. Fiona Schmigelo, who will moderate what promises to be a fascinating conversation. Over to you, Ted.
Thank you, Mike, and good day to everybody. Et merci au personnel de la Fédération humaine pour le travail
for the Federation of Humanities for the work they've done for this virtual Congress to be here today.
Some of the most progressive and influential voices from the social sciences and humanities community in Canada. We are thankful that during this pandemic year, we can still gather to continue the tradition. Before I introduce today's speaker, the Honorable Ethel Blondin-Andrew, Privy Councillor, I'd like to present another special guest who will moderate today's discussion. Dr. Fiona Schmigelo is the director of the University of Alberta North and a professor in the Faculty of Agricultural, Life, and Environmental Sciences. So thank you for being with us today, Dr. Schmigelo. La recherche en sciences humaines contribue.
Research in social sciences helps society in technology and the intellectual property of Canada to help better to understand for society and find solutions for Canadians. Many research, native research, respect the authority of the natives, and we have to help them and to have cooperative research projects and work with them firsthand.
In the context of ongoing dialogue with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and in close collaboration with SSHRC's Indigenous Advisory Circle, SSHRC launched its Indigenous Research Statement of Principles. The statement recognizes that SSHRC needs to support Indigenous research, including a wide range of unique theoretical and methodological approaches to fulfill its commitment to scholarly excellence. Beginning in 2018, through extensive engagement with Indigenous partners and on behalf of the 3 federal research granting agencies, SSHRC co-developed a strategy for an interdisciplinary research and research training model that contributes to reconciliation. The strategy sets out 4 directions to strengthen the capacity of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities to lead their own research and partner with the broader research community. First, building relations with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. Second, supporting research priorities of Indigenous peoples. Thirdly, creating greater funding accessibility. And fourthly, championing Indigenous leadership. Lancé en janvier 2020.
So it was in January 2020 that strategy also coordinates research across Canada to do work with First Nations interdisciplinary model for training, for research, and in the spirit of reconciliation. The strategy has started very well, even if we know it will take time and efforts and great collaboration to reach our objective in the near future. So we're completely cooperating and with federal government and entities with financing, and we will be guided with respected relations with First Nations, the Inuit and the Métis.
It is now my great honor to introduce our keynote speaker for today's big thinking event, the Honorable Ethel Blondin-Andrew, Privy Councillor, a Dene woman and strong Indigenous leader who has served 17 years in Parliament, 13 of these in Cabinet, and was the first Indigenous woman elected as a member of Parliament. Before embarking upon her political career, she spent many years working in the North as a teacher and Indigenous languages specialist, drawing on her knowledge of Dene languages. She has advanced the astute perspectives Indigenous leadership can bring to complex social problems, such as environmental stewardship and the preservation of Canada's biodiversity. And during her political career, she introduced legislation to protect Indigenous languages at risk of extinction, and she delivered her first speech in Canada's House of Commons in her Dene language. Merci, Madame Blondin-Andrew.
Thank you, Mrs. Andrew, to be here today. We cannot wait to hear you and learn more about your experience and your perspective. So I'm turning the microphone to you. Bienvenue.
And I believe you're still on mute.
Oh, sorry. Oh my goodness, sorry about that. Thank you very much, Merci beaucoup. And
Thank you very much.
my colleague Edna Elias, who I've known for many years and admire, was involved in the opening, and I want to recognize her. She's an honorable person and very professional, and a valued elder in the Inuvialuit and the Inuit community, as well as all of Canada and probably internationally. The title of my speech is Yazon Kerati. As you can see from the picture posted, that we call this daylight. We see the daylight. We always say that in Dene. It means that we see the beautiful light and the light of hope, the light of a new beginning from each day. And we look to that light for hope and for inspiration and for a sense of calm and spirituality for the day, to look at the day, greet the day in a good way. So it's a very special thing for us to see the light of day, as it is for all humanity, I suppose. Long before I went to residential school, my parents gave me what I needed to survive in this world. My parents raised me on the land. We traveled by dog team. We traveled by dog team, by boat, and by foot, as our people are known to do. And I find that I acquired a taste for country life and also a taste for country food. It's a part of my diet to this day. My parents taught me to love and respect the land, the animals, and the people. And one thing that my big grandmother did is my big granny Onte, who's in that picture with my grandfather. My grandfather was signatory for Treaty 11. His name is Zol Blondin, and my granny Catherine was known as a healer and an advisor. If you could believe in a patriarchal society, my grandmother was a strong matriarch who transcended the gender lines and provided an approach to me that was fearless. She gave me the gift of language, and I come from an oral tradition. In an oral tradition, we don't have a writing system per se. We adapted syllabics through the church and through a shorthand system. We also believe in a modern sense. In the 80s, I worked on standardization process for an orthography for our language, but truly, basically, we are an oral tradition people. We tell our story and our reality by storytelling. We are storytellers, and we predicate everything on drawing out the images of what we do and who we are. So I'm grateful for that gift. This is a huge part of who I am and what I do. As a Mountain Dene or Shootout Dene, I am not surprised that we've come to a place where we're fully engaged in a process called Indigenous-led conservation. And we are also working on Indigenous protected conserved areas, especially, sorry, it is basically that process is who we are and what we do. as Indigenous peoples globally. Wherever we are, it is the land and the animals and the people we look to, the earth, and wherever we are. That's what we look to. We look to the earth, to the people, and to the Indigenous, the animals indigenous to that area and their habitat. You know, my grandmother gave me a gift called the gift of receiving and the gift of giving. They are both equally important. And the gift of ceremony, wherever we are, whatever we take from the land, we basically have to recognize that. While there's incredible diversity between different Indigenous peoples and nations, languages, we share a powerful commonality. We center our interrelationships with the land and the water and the animals. We understand our fundamental dependence upon the land, and we continue to act with this in mind. We are the stewards of the remaining biodiversity of the planet. While the world's 370 million Indigenous people make up less than 5% of the total human population, we managed to hold tenure over 25% of the world's land surface and support about 80% of the global diversity. This was in a statement put out by the World Bank. This is our power. It is who we are. It brings us, in particular me, the joy and inspiration at this stage of my life. I just turned 70, which I share with my husband, and also who is also a shootout and an elder. We've come to a place in our lives where we both love to work on the land. It's where we are at our best. You see the pictures of me tanning a hide. That was 4 days ago. I had to clean all the hair off the hide of that all the hair off that moose hide. That moose hide was gifted to me from my brother-in-law, Wally Andrew. He gave me that hide, and I am going through a tanning process. When I'm done this, I will don my hide tanning wardrobe and go out and flesh the hide. So I believe when you're involved in conservation, if you're involved in climate change, you're involved with people, and you're involved with animal habitat, you have to touch the earth. You cannot just be words. You have to be someone who goes and does those things. If you work with conservation issues, you have to go to the land. If you are dealing with food security and food sovereignty, you have to be a harvester. I make a lot of dry meat when I have the opportunity. And it's been very difficult with the pandemic, but here we are in this place. And over the last decade, momentum has been building internationally regarding the crucial role Indigenous people play in biodiversity and ecosystem preservation. Just recently, a national panel, a national advisory panel, and an Indigenous circle of experts known as ICE were formed to provide advice and recommendations on achieving Canada's target 1. You know, we have this target of 30 by 30, and it's much touted and talked about. ICE comprises Indigenous and non-Indigenous citizens of Canada who have worked together to make progress on pathway to Canada Target 1. This is ICE report that's entitled, "We Rise Together, Achieving Pathways to Canada Target 1 through the creation of Indigenous protected and conserved areas in the spirit and practice of reconciliation." This is the real nitty-gritty of who we are and what we do. We're kind of like Dr. Seuss. We say as we do and we do as we say. We and you know, it's really interesting. Some of the Indigenous Circle of Experts 2018 report in 2020, the 10th meeting of the Congress of the Parties in Nagoya, Japan, at the prefecture, countries around the world adopted a strategic plan for biodiversity out of this gathering that came together there. In response, in 2015, Canada adopted a national, sorry, I just have to adjust something here. It's very awkward here. I don't have a studio. I'm in my dining room. But Canada adopted a suite of national targets known as the 2020 biodiversity goals and targets for Canada. These 4 goals and 19 targets cover issues ranging from species at risk to sustainable forestry, connecting Canadians to nature. It's really interesting. I read an article today about a guy driving down in BC with a huge tree, an old growth forest tree, strapped to the back of his truck and transporting it. And the hue and cry from all over the world, you know, in Denmark, and the number of calls that people made saying that this shouldn't happen. Well, this had been harvested or cultivated before the protection of old growth forests law came in. And it just goes to show you how fast and how furious people have become in their caring about what grows on the land, what's in our habitat, and what we are realigning as the things that we want to protect. It's very interesting. Canada's target also states by 2020, at least 17% of terrestrial areas and inland waters and 10% of coastal and marine areas are conserved through networks of protected areas and other effective area-based conservation measures. It was widely understood, and wildly too, I think, from what I'm hearing, understood that Canada's Target 1 could only be achieved through collaboration amongst government departments, community, municipalities, Indigenous peoples, and others. One group can't do it. It has to be everybody. We all have to care about the earth. We all have to care about each other. It doesn't seem like that sometimes when you listen to the news and you hear of the uncaring ways that rear its ugly head. That's not who we are. This is who we are. And we lead by example. In the introduction by Eli Enns and Danica Littlechild, they say, since time immemorial, Indigenous peoples in Canada have been diligent and ingenious cultivators of biological diversity through advanced economic practices that were founded on natural law, Indigenous economies, followed Indigenous worldviews, which understood that human systems are part of and must remain in balance with ecosystems. The outcome and effect of these worldwide views and economic practices was abundant, thriving biological diversity. These same fundamental principles underline the large-scale movement Land Back, recently highlighted by David Suzuki Foundation and the Yellowhead Institute. Both assert that it is Indigenous governance and legal structures that will lead the way on the powerful changes needed to support innovative and adaptive climate change strategies with land and relationships with communities, peoples, and sustainable economies. And relationships with and sustainable economies at heart. Both also assert that IPCAs and guardians are only part of a much bigger picture, but a very big part of it, actually. They are very, very important. This is the reality that I live with. This is what I am involved with. Just recently, my husband went on a survey of caribou in the Mackenzie Mountains. Those are the pictures that you see. They went by chopper and he took guardians with him on each section of, there were 3 sections they did, and they took guardians with them to travel. We've also taken guardians out with us on the land, where, as you see in that picture, you see the guardians out at Titsike or Drum Lake, very much enjoying the harvest. And they shared that harvest with everyone. They set up like a meat market where they processed all the foods with the help of their mentor, Ricky Andrew, and proceeded to share their kill with the community as well as the people in that particular camp. A bit about the IPCAs. Indigenous Protected and Conserved Areas is the term chosen by ICE to describe a variety of land protection initiatives in a Canadian context. It includes tribal parks, Indigenous cultural landscapes, Indigenous protected areas, and Indigenous conserved areas. IPCAs are lands and waters where Indigenous governments have the primary role in protecting and conserving ecosystems through Indigenous laws, governance, and knowledge systems. Language and culture are the heart and soul of IPCAs. Through our engagement processes across Canada, our research on national and international case studies, we learned that IPCAs can vary in terms of their governance and management objectives. They are generally shared they generally share 3 essential elements. They are Indigenous-led. They represent a long-term commitment to conservation. They are basically what they do is while IPCAs can vary in terms of governance and management objectives, they're basically the same. They elevate Indigenous rights and responsibility in the Canadian context. IPCAs represent a modern application of traditional values, Indigenous laws, and the Indigenous knowledge system, and exercise in cultural continuity on the land and waters, a foundation for basically local Indigenous economies. And there you see our young guardian, Jonathan Aya, who is out on the survey of, it's a lifetime opportunity to be with an elder and to be with such a great person like Pierre Chaillon, who is not only the videographer, but the biologist who does the working and the testing, collecting samples. This helps us to follow and to have good science, both natural and empirical evidence to deal with the genome of the genome of the caribou, as well as their range and where they travel and what their habitat is like, whether it's suitable. Indigenous governments are responsible for setting conservation standards for IPCAs. As such, they have full scope to design their IPCAs to meet their individual and diverse needs. How can IPCAs benefit all Canada? When more land is protected and conserved, ecosystems have a greater chance of both thriving and repairing the negative impacts of human economic development. This benefits all Canadians in the form of cleaner air and water, improved human health, and greater odds of adaptation to climate change impacts for healthy futures for land and for people. On October 1st, 2020, Prime Minister Trudeau at the UN's first ever General Assembly on Biodiversity committed to conserving 30% of Canada's land and ocean by 2030. That's what they refer to as 30 by 30. A critical element of IPCA's is the Guardians program. These have diverse names: Coastal Watchmen. You see Jonathan there is a guardian, and rangers in Australia's and stewards, but all center their commitment on the inherent relationship Indigenous people have to particular places. So there you see the Haida Watchmen. Many, many years ago, when I was helping negotiate as Minister Axworthy, the Haida Gwaii Trust, we met with Miles Richardson. Miles Richardson, myself, and many others are now leaders and advisors on the Guardians program. What I would like to do now is talk about the Guardians, and I don't have very much time left, so I'm going to make it very quick. There is word that there's somewhere between 70 and 40 Indigenous nations and communities in Canada that have launched Guardian programs. There's believed to be 70 programs, but there's 40 Indigenous nations that are involved. Studies have been conducted to assess how effective Guardian programs are in returning value for money. And we have an investment of 4.5 million. One study found that the Tsuutsoke Guardians on Great Slave Lake generated 11.1 million in socioeconomic, cultural, and environmental value. Things like training, access to traditional foods, language retention, decreased crime, also things like training, additional funding leverage from other sources, all had an impact. Decreased better health and decreased obesity. In the Great Bear Rainforest, which is another example, the long-running Guardian Watchman program boasts a 10-to-1 return on investment using similar metric of services or of success. It doesn't just protect the land, it's actually an incredible way of community healing. And it's the executive director of the ILI, Valerie Courtois, stated, intergenerational Guardian teams are leading the way, harvesting and traditional food sharing for elders and families and hunters, best nutrition for health, environmental monitoring, water, fish sampling to track persistent organic pollutants, ensure the safety of water, collaboration between knowledge holders and Southern scientists for better science and understanding of ecosystem or the ecosystem health. If I look at some of the work that my husband has done in the mountains with over the years, he's worked on many things. He's now involved in the he's now involved in many of the species at risk, the Mackenzie River Basin. He's also involved in the Mooskin boat. He's been involved in this is the fourth one he's heading into in July to build the Mooskin boat and to retrace the steps of their ancestors, which is very important, and to pass on those skills to young Guardians. We will have apprentices on that. So jobs is very important. The Guardians are doing good work and being paid for good work. It's a gainful occupation that supports families and communities instead of being trained to work in industry, which some refer to as a deficit model. They are trained in heritage and local life ways to protect land and culture. For young Indigenous people, seeing people they know working in well-paying jobs where they do not have to leave their communities and families for weeks or months at a time, and in jobs that center Indigenous cultures and lands is life-changing. I've been involved, like I said, when you are part of this whole effort that involves the training and mentoring of guardians, and also in Indigenous-led conservation, you have to actually go out and be part of. I've been part of 4 camps. The first camp was a tent camp in Kashagut in the lands at 40 and 50 below. We were in a tent camp for 18 days. We were then in Kate, which is Willow Flats over in between the Yukon and Northwest Territories border, in the heartland of Mountain Dene country. The Dichinta process took us through a journey from our Dene governance through the treaties, now on a journey of decolonization and reconciliation, land treaties, and now to looking at UNDRIP and the effects of that and self-government. We all discussed while we were practicing our traditional ways of cleaning meat and hides within view of the high caribou pastures. Petlana Joe, we went out to Caribou Flats and took the community hunt on the Keel River, the Begade. The best activity from this camp was a traditional mapping exercise, as well as a lot of harvesting and processing and sharing of the meat. You see the photos that are there where we did the mapping, and that was so integral because it's the elders that know in depth. One thing I heard at that particular camp there was that there are no birch trees around that area, and around one area, and the people have to go to a certain area, and the elder pointed that out. So that knowledge is very specific to their experience, their time on the land. They've spent more time on the land than anybody I know. Teteke is a spiritual and culturally specific location. It's truly a special experience for all 25 of us that were in that camp. It moved us, it changed us, and more programming is proliferating across the Satu and beyond, and the momentum is growing. Through each successive camp, we could see the transformation of young people as they learned. We learned what the young people needed as they became more confident to tell us. The dialogue grew. There was a growing realization that these young people, given the proper mentorship, guidance, and resource, can take opportunities to work on the land and be on the land. So when I say the land is me, I mean it through every phase of my life. And at this stage, it's working with guardians, it's working on the land and touching the earth. I want to thank you for your time. This is probably not the best place for our people to learn and to dialogue, but here we are. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ethel, for a really inspiring presentation. There are so many points of resonance there, I'm sure, for the audience. I have the privilege of having a short dialogue with you, but I'd like to encourage participants to submit any questions in the Q&A box, and there will be an opportunity for some exchange with Ethel subsequent to the next little bit. Ethel, I think many people may not be aware that amongst the many effects of colonization, the history of conservation in Canada and globally has had major impacts on Indigenous populations, and in some cases actively alienating them or excluding them from areas that were foundational, just central to their connection with the land. And I think you've really illustrated for us just how important reestablishing those connections are. And I think there's, those fundamental differences between IPCAs and what we've historically known as protected areas. And protected areas in sort of Western culture were areas that were put aside specifically to protect those areas from human activities. And yet with IPCAs, it really feels that the intent is to maintain those histories of connections with the land and cultural continuity. And I know you touched upon this, but I wonder if you could just speak to how you feel the management of those areas will be fundamentally different as a result of the Indigenous-led conservation.
Well, basically, it's the Indigenous knowledge that lays part of the foundation. There was no involvement in the setting aside. There was minimal involvement, I would say, if any, in setting aside of the protected areas. They were identified by Indigenous people in some cases, like in the land claims, when we did land use plans. That was a meaningful process, but this takes it even further. It designs a program that goes hand in glove with the training of guardians. The guardians will be the stewards of the land. They will be the people that will receive the information they need to be able to, and this is what happened in those camps that I was in, is particularly the ones that well, all of them, but the one that was so profound and so moving was the Drum Lake one, where the young people ingested some kind of a spiritual essence with regard to the place that they were in, and also with regards to how we should preserve this for the future. That we are essentially the land, we are essentially the animals, and we are essentially our language and our culture and what we do on that land. So the IPC, Indigenous Protected Areas, the foundation of that is how well we train our people, how well we place them within the protected areas.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you for that. In my position as a teacher and in working with students as part of U Alberta North, I consider it to be one of the great privileges of my position. The young people are so inspiring in terms of their energy and passion. And I think we're really seeing that in Indigenous guardians, recognizing that they span all ages as well. You've touched upon the importance of language and culture, and you just talked about place names as well. And I wonder if you could just speak or share with the audience the significance of place names from your perspective.
Well, my husband and I have been married 28 years, and we've got a process where we have a book in our living room where because we're elders and we have knowledge of place names. My husband's walked 222 miles with the British paratroopers from the Mackenzie Valley over to the Yukon. And a person doesn't do that if they don't know the land. He knows every mountain, every place. We catalog and we write. And when we go with the youth, the guardians, we did 2 mapping exercises. We did one in Caribou Flats and we did one in Drum Lake. And what we do is my former work is in the area of transcription and translation, and I taught methodology in the Indigenous language. So I can write in the orthography the Indigenous or the Dene names, the shootout in the names of places. So it's a great combination. He knows where they are. He knows how they are pronounced, and I know how to write them, and how we both speak the same language. It's magic. It really is. And we are nervous about our time left, and we are nervous to make sure that we leave something for our people, our family, our children, and the young guardians to have those maps. We are going to continue to make those maps for them and leave them as something they can use. They're so important. The names of places are done experientially in Dene. It's what happens there. What is it that makes that place that way? when you look at a place like Drum Lake, it's called Techeche. It means beating the lake. It doesn't mean drums were made there. It means you beat the lake so that they could have fish come, and they called their fish like that. Interesting. It's a very interesting, and other places have names because of the history of that place, because of, if you go to Caribou Flats, there's a flatland there where all the caribou graze and gather. That's why they call it Caribou Flats. And in Dene, Shuta is all about mountains. Shuta Dene, Shuta Gotene, Shuta Kede, the mountain language, the mountain caribou, the mountain people. It's all like that. It's magical, actually.
Mm-hmm. There's such a rich body of knowledge that's embedded in those names and in the language for the places. You talked about the importance of storytelling, and it seems that so many of those place names actually they tell the story, they hold the story of the relationship of the people with those places, with the land. And it's incredible to see, that a lot of places are now being renamed with their proper Indigenous names from what were, basically explorers' names or moniker names from far away. And that seems to be a really important part of reconciliation as part of conservation as well.
Mm-hmm. It's taking back, actually.
Mm-hmm.
It's, reconciling.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Ethel, you've had this amazing journey from growing up on the land to playing such a significant role on national, international stages, and then you've sort of come full circle and are really devoting your time to being on the land again now, and in working with young people. And I think I suspect that's a very conscious decision on your part. And I wonder if you could just speak to how those relationships that you've developed through your other activities as a politician and as a statesperson for many different governments and initiatives, how does that sort of intersect with the work you're now doing, working with youth on the land?
My friend Jeff York used to say, he was a reporter with the Globe and Mail. He went to Caribou Flats with us when we were married 28 years ago. And he said, "You're the only person I know that can eat a piece of meat cooked on the open fire on a piece of cardboard and then dine out in Geneva at a, United Nations meeting or in Denmark or wherever." He said, "It's so funny to see that." But, it's what's inside of you. The passion never goes away. It's my primary window was being on the land when I was a child and learning my language from my grandmother and being gifted all of the experiences that I've been gifted with. I traveled with my mom and dad in the dead of winter with a dog team. And I traveled on the river because my dad is a very expert boatsman. And we walked a lot to snares and to do all those activities. And that doesn't go away from you. That stays with you. We are who the girl child or the boy child is in us. It's there. And if we reach for it, it will come out. Our passions are built on those experiences. So are our tragedies. We're lucky if we have those things that save us, because not all of life is easy. There's a lot of tragedy, a lot of grief. I went to residential school, and from being a totally free being to being someone totally restricted, divided by race, by language, by gender, by age, not being allowed to be with your family, was very traumatic for me. I did not do well in residential school or day school because I was like a wild animal and caged. And in some cases, my friends would say, "You still are like a wild animal," but that's good. That's I need that at my age. I'm 70 and I need every part of me that wants to live. And that's who I am. I I embrace it all. My sister is a caregiver healer and works with social issues. And she said that it's a good thing to embrace everything, to make the world, you know, we are one thing, but we are many things too. We can be multitudes. We can be whoever we meet. We are only one of a very multifaceted world. So I embrace a lot that I see.
Thank you for
You
that.
can be anything and everything in this world. We're so gifted.
Thank you. I'd encourage audience members again to submit any questions that you might have or comments for Ethel in the Q&A box. I'm going to take the liberty of asking you one more question, Ethel, which I think it goes a little bit beyond the focus of this presentation, but I hope also relates, and that speaks to your history as a teacher and your relationship with the University of Alberta, having done your education degree at the university and then learning all of these life lessons. And I wonder if you could reflect on sort of the land-based learning and the movement towards building some of those reconnections and how we can embed that much more in our curriculum to provide that grounding for the young people coming up.
Yeah. I am a bit of an oddity in that I talk about embracing everything. Well, I'm a huge proponent of STEM, which is science, technology, energy, engineering, and math. I love that part of it, and I'll tell you why. But I'm also a really big proponent of grounding people in their culture and their language, so they are fearless and they can go anywhere and survive. I went to the Gaza in the 1990s when the Intifada happened. I was unafraid. People couldn't understand that. How can you be so brave? It's life. It is what it is. But I believe if we embrace both sides and if we create young people who have the capacity to survive in all worlds, that's important. But the grounding culturally, traditionally is so important. Without that, you are hollow. You can gain all kinds of skills, but you don't have yourself. You need yourself. That was taken from many of our people. And I refused to give that up. I did not lose my language when I went to residential school or to day school. My grandmother gave us that gift, and all of the ones that she gave it to still have it. As far as STEM is concerned, we need to train people in those disciplines because it makes them competitive in the world. It makes them highly mobile and it makes them richer. You can make more money. Not that money is everything, but it's a means to an end. It enables you to do those things that cost money. And I really believe I want our people to be upwardly mobile, to be competitive, to go out there and to name their price and to write their own ticket. I believe that about apprenticeships too. I believe our people should be red sealed. It could be in engineering, biology, whatever. They should be apprenticed and they should know their craft. Our people did not survive on the land for thousands of years, working with animal species and working in the worst or the best environment or the toughest conditions by not knowing. They knew what they knew. They knew their craft. And our kids should be equally capable, equally adept to survive in this world. It's kind of odd. People say, how can you survive? How can you support that when you talk about being on the land? I don't see the difference. It takes courage. It takes ferocity. It takes commitment and determination to be who you are, to survive in this world. We've all been tested with the pandemic. We know what we're capable of. We know what we are not capable of. And we know where we've wasted time, where we've wasted our life, and we're going to change that. That's what it's all about.
Thank you. We have time for one question from the audience, and it's a comment as much. It says, thank you so much for this presentation. I'm wondering if you can comment on what process a community must go through to gain official recognition for their IPCAs.
What? Sorry, repeat that last
The question from the audience member is what the process is for a community to gain recognition of their IPCAs.
Well, it's not easy, and this is why you have to assert if you have a land claims, if you have self-government, if you have certain rights and certain legal statutes, you have to assert that, you have to realize it. You know, if you win certain cases and if you have certain agreements, an agreement is only as good as it is implemented. I just went to a meeting this morning where a steering committee was meeting in my home community of Toledo, where they were putting together the basic tenets and structures of projects and of a mechanism for approving what an IPCA candidate will be for their area. And it could be anything. It could be Neonep-Ene, which is the backbone for the Mackenzie area. It could be a looping together of 3 lakes, Willow Lake, Kelly Lake, and Lenny Lake, 3 lakes together, which have a very beautiful and strong character of habitat and animals and everything else. So it starts with who from your community is in that governance structure of the steering committee. You need elders, youth. I worked for the last 3 days trying to get the proper representation for our leaders to put forward for people to be able to make those decisions themselves. You have to set up a steering committee that is able and that is committed to doing and making whatever they want to out of that Indigenous protected area. They're going to determine that. It's not like before where it's top down.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. I think that's an excellent point to end on. I'm afraid that's all the time we have for questions today. On behalf of everyone, Ethel, I'd like to thank you for your wonderful presentation and your very generous reflections on a wide range of topics as part of our discussion. It's been a really engaging conversation. I'd also like to thank the Big Thinking series sponsors, the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, Universities Canada, and the Canada Foundation for Innovation for their generous support. If you'd like to revisit the Honorable Ethel Blondin-Andrew's talk in this conversation, the video will be available on the Congress 2021 platform in the coming days. The next Big Thinking event organized by the Black Graduate Students Association here at the University of Alberta will take place tomorrow at 12 p.m. Mountain Time. Dr. Shirley Ann Tate, Canada Research Chair in Feminism and Intersectionality, will speak on racism's touch. I can't quite put my finger on it. Please do join us for this. I've had the privilege of interacting with Dr. Tate through the organization of Congress, and I'm sure this will be a very engaging and stimulating session. Thank you once again, Ethel, and thank you, audience, for joining us this afternoon, and I hope this has been a great start to Congress for you. Goodbye.
Thank you very much. Thank you.